In the Resident Evil universe, Raccoon City is now just a memory, but the events that unfolded there still affect the series to this day, so I thought it was time for us to take a trip back to Raccoon City and try to dig up as much lore from the rubble as possible.
Aw.
Keep in mind that due to the remakes, a few things have been changed depending on which canon you follow, but for the most part, it all remains intact. From corrupt politicians to juicy raccoon soda, here are 50 facts about Raccoon City. Raccoon City began to rapidly grow in the late 1960s, the same time Umbrella moved into the area. During this growth, Umbrella saw construction of the tram line leading to the Arklay Mountains, the subway system, establishment of the police department and the RPD building, as well as continuing economic boom. It's believed that Umbrella invested in not only the town, but the people running it who could work in their favor. In 1991, Raccoon City suffered from a recession, but Mayor Michael Warren devised a revival plan and thanks to the generous funding from Umbrella, was able to execute it, building Raccoon General Hospital, and Umbrella also financed the creation of the STARS unit, which they specifically made sure was comprised of military veterans and scientific experts.
Wow.
Arklay County is home to not just Raccoon City, but also a small village called Stoneville, a suburb called Rhodes Hill, and a small settlement called Cedar, as well as a few other locations. Raccoon City had its own football team, the Raccoon Sharks. The news on the TV in Outbreak File 1 mentions a riot breaking out at one of their games.
There was a disruption earlier at today's football match between the Raccoon Sharks and the Oakland Raiders.
The statue where you get the battery in Resident Evil 3 is modeled after the mayor and is the closest we ever get to seeing his face. Also, Chief Irons most likely lied about the mayor asking him to take care of his daughter. When the virus began to overrun the city, the mayor fled in panic, leaving her behind. Once out of the city, he placed himself in custody of the army and is possibly still alive. One of the main roads going through the city is called Ennerdale Street and is featured in Resident Evil 2 and 3. This is the street where Leon and Claire must pass through a crashed bus, and also the street Jill takes to get to the RPD front gates. After the events of Raccoon City, there were what are referred to as the Raccoon Trials, a 5-year-long court battle. Umbrella, specifically Spencer, hired the best legal team possible, and they were fighting the long court case until someone presented Umbrella's research as proof, ending the case almost immediately. That person was none other than Albert Wesker.
Ooh, Wesker.
In the Resident Evil 2 Remake main menu, you can see a shot of Raccoon City, but if the player moves the camera, they will see that it's actually a series of flat images. The skyline is also modeled after Montreal, Quebec.
That's cool.
The Raccoon City Zoo was a big staple in the community and used to have an annual parade starring Oscar the Elephant dressed in Christmas decor. There is a conflict as to what type of bomb was used to destroy Raccoon City. Most players recognize it as being a nuclear bomb, but Yasuhisa Kawamura, who worked on the script for the third game as well as being responsible for creating the Mercenaries minigame, cited that he wrote the bomb as thermobaric, not nuclear. This is why radiation is never mentioned to be in the remains of Raccoon City.
That makes sense.
In the second movie, the bomb detonates in this part of Raccoon City, but in reality, this is actually the City Hall building in Toronto, Canada. And fun fact, this scene was done by recreating the building as a miniature and then blowing it up with a timed explosion sequence.
That's cool.
Emmy's Diner is featured in the intro of the original Resident Evil 2, but after that is almost removed from the canon entirely, not appearing in Darkside Chronicles, Operation Raccoon City, or the 2019 remake. The first time we will be seeing it since its debut will be in the new film Welcome to Raccoon City. The Apple Inn was a hotel that was frequented by several characters, including Ben, Claire, and Dario Rosso, who was currently staying at the hotel when the outbreak happened. Ada Wong also makes a stop at this hotel, not as a guest, but as a liaison where she delivers a virus sample to Wesker. Raccoon University was completed in the 1940s and is the biggest college in the city and unsurprisingly houses an advanced laboratory for the Umbrella Corporation.
Wow.
The university is connected to several characters, including George, who had several colleagues there, as well as Yoko and Valerie, who were both students there. It's also worth noting that Elza Walker was planned to have been a student here as well. Raccoon Park was built as an attraction and was often used as a place where citizens would meet up. In the original concept art, the tram Jill and Carlos ride was supposed to crash here instead of the clock tower.
That's cool.
First built in 1908 and funded by donations, St. Michael's Clock Tower was originally an elementary school and thanks to high enrollment rates, was able to keep the building up to date and maintained, but by the 70s it was deemed too old and dangerous, and was closed off to everyone except the clergy that resided there. As part of the mayor's plan to restore the city, Umbrella funded the renovation of the clock tower and it reopened in the mid-90s.
That's cool.
Raccoon City has at least 3 different gas station companies within it, including Taxago, Stagla, and Mesoil. Also in Raccoon City are a few food businesses that are parodies of real companies, including Mon Mon Hot Dogs, Racco Bell, Dairy Fresh Grocery Store, and Burger Kong. In the outbreak scenario Underbelly, you start at the South Raccoon Street station and have to get the trains moving in order to escape. Depending on how you complete the scenario, the characters end up in 2 different places. If you take the train, they end up stopping in the Arklay Mountains due to the tracks being blocked, and this leads to the abandoned hospital in the flashback scenario. If you fail to catch the train, it leaves without you, and then you have to climb a large ventilation duct and end up in an alley that leads directly to the RPD's Desperate Times scenario. In the Brady Game strategy guide for Outbreak, it is stated that Jack's Bar is haunted. This was most likely added to help provide context for the random events such as the screaming and the bottle falling throughout the scenario, but it's unknown if this information is official or not. In Outbreak, Bob has one of the most clear depictions of what happens to someone who is infected with the T-virus. When playing as Mark only, if you shoulder Bob and wait at the door, you'll see this bonus cutscene. Then if you board up the break room area, there's yet another scene where you see Bob get worse. And finally, once on the rooftop, Bob will take his own life, unless you can get him up there in very hard mode, which will cause him to turn into a zombie.
Them. I feel the hunger.
No. Kill him.
The reason Raccoon City has so many of the same breed of dog is because most of them are actually clones. Being a test project since the 80s, the dogs were also cheaper to prototype than hunters. Dobermans were chosen as the test dogs since they were intended to be sold to the military, but they all ended up escaping the labs. After Jill exits the RPD in the 3rd game, the time changes to night, and if you head back to the warehouse to check on Dario, you will see that he was attacked and eaten by zombies.
Aww.
Thankfully, he leaves a diary and some gunpowder behind for Jill. The Ecliptic Express is a privately owned train operated by Umbrella and used to transport students to their training school. It's worth noting that all the people that were on the train who end up dying and becoming zombies were working for Umbrella in some capacity.
Oh, well.
The training facility in Resident Evil 0 is specifically designed for child prodigies and is where several high-profile scientists for Umbrella were taught, including Albert Wesker and William Birkin.
Wow.
The training facility is also home to some disturbing experiments that Marcus performed, mainly on children. This included tricking students into touching leeches to infect them, and as they mutate, test their survival capabilities by chaining them up, drowning them, removing their organs, and even locking them in a gas chamber.
Oh my god.
You can find their bones and skeletons in a few locations throughout the lower level areas. In the audio files in Darkside Chronicles, we get to hear the phone call where Annette tells Sherry to go to the police station, as well as another audio file where she explains to Sherry what will happen to the city.
Okay. I need you to leave school and go home right away. Tell your teacher it's got to do with Mommy's job and that you have to leave right away. Can you be home in 30 minutes?
I suppose, but why? Did something happen?
In Outbreak's
Wow.
End of the Road scenario, you meet a scientist named Linda. She is actually a recycled version of Ada, who is originally a scientist named Linda in Resident Evil 1.5.
Huh.
In the Hive scenario in Outbreak, Jim will drop a reference to Street Fighter, referring to Dr. Hirsch as that Dalsum-looking guy, which is an obvious nod to Dalsum in Street Fighter. In Operation Raccoon City, you can find portraits of the Ashford family in the City Hall building. Also in Operation Raccoon City, you can see photos of Chief Irons, including one that appears to show him with a wife and child. The parking garage in Resident Evil 3 has an unused alternate version that is completely destroyed. This was most likely intended to be used after the gravedigger causes the ground to collapse in the garage. Here are 2 early test renders left in the game data for Resident Evil 3, showing the clock tower fight, and this
cool.
one shows the Nemesis on the bridge to the Dead Factory.
That's cool.
There are also several beta and unused backgrounds in Resident Evil 2, like this version of the passage to the factory where there's a big bloody hole in the wall. Rats were blamed for carrying the virus into the city, but they actually infected the water supply near the lake, which then made its way into the city and rapidly began infecting thousands of people.
Yep.
There are several posters advertising a concert for the band Big E throughout the city. They were supposed to be performing on September 30th, but the outbreak prevented them from entering the city. However, it seems that they had been there before, indicated by the SP item Big E's ring that can be found in the Hellfire scenario in Outbreak.
That's
in
cool.
the same scenario, there's also a medal commemorating their previous visit to the Apple Inn. The street that Leon and Claire crash and have to part ways in is called Flower Street. It's also where several businesses are located, including a tailoring business named Arukas, which is Sakura spelled backwards, a nod to the Street Fighter character of the same name.
That's cool.
Speaking of Street Fighter, there is another reference to a character in Resident Evil 3 on the sign for Eagle's Pet Shop. Eagle was a Street Fighter character who debuted in the first game. September 29th was a holiday known as Michaelmas, celebrating the end of the agricultural year and is heavily celebrated by police officers since Saint Michael is the patron saint of police. His original name pronunciation is Mikhail, which might also be where Mikhail's name comes from, but that's just my speculation. In the opening monologue of Resident Evil 3, a street is shown with a large sign that reads Grady's Inn. This is an edited photo of a real street in Boston on the corner of North Street and Fleet Street.
That's cool.
Even though the city's downfall really began around September 28th, following orders from the Pentagon, the army had already begun surrounding the city around September 25th, joined shortly by the National Guard. Any civilians that made it out were taken to a special quarantine zone.
Wow.
The Hunter Gammas were ordered to be destroyed by Umbrella, citing them as useless due to them being docile and friendly to the researchers who were developing them. One researcher who had grown attached to them defied these orders and decided to hide them in order to continue research on them. They eventually began to escape and run rampant once Raccoon City began to fall.
Ew.
Hunter Betas, on the other hand, weren't supposed to be in Raccoon City at all, since they were being developed by Umbrella in Europe. However, once Umbrella saw what was happening in the city, they ordered 20 of them to be shipped and released into the city in order to study their combat data. The origins of the Gravedigger are vague, but it seems to have been created due to an excessive dumping of T-virus subjects from the Nest Lab contaminating soil. This caused an arthropod to mutate into the giant monster. This also led to side effects of extreme hunger, causing it to head to the cemetery and eat buried bodies in desperation. There are 3 main brands of soda in Raccoon City. One is Chocha-Cola, which was later removed after a cease and desist from Coca-Cola. Then there's a brand called Juicy Raccoon, which can be seen in Resident Evil 3, Outbreak, and Umbrella Chronicles. And finally is a brand called Trish, which is a reference to Trish from Devil May Cry. In the Uptown sales office is a commercial for one of 3 types of drugs made by Umbrella. First is Safsprin, which is a pill similar to aspirin and used for common colds and pain relief. Then there's Adravil, a topical ointment. And lastly, Aquacure, which is a physical fitness recovery supplement targeted to women and is also one of Umbrella's most popular products.
What?
The Arklay Mountains are native to various green, red, and blue herbs throughout the series. Once their healing properties were discovered, they became very popular in Raccoon City's community, used in everything from medicine to cooking and most commonly, for decoration. Umbrella ended up creating a species of these herbs that were able to thrive in other areas, effectively being responsible for all the herbs found across different continents in the series. While there is some speculation, the most commonly agreed real-world equivalent of Raccoon City is Springfield, Missouri. Among the committee that voted to bomb Raccoon City were Senator Ron Davis from Degeneration and Derek Simmons from Resident Evil 6, who is mainly responsible for ordering the missile strike. On October 1st, 1998, the thermobaric missile was detonated in the heart of Raccoon City, instantly
Dang.
killing over 100,000 people and wiping the city off the map.
Wow.
And that was the end of Raccoon City.
That's sad. So I have not played the earlier version of the Resident Evil games. I've only played the remakes, and I played Resident Evil 4 original, and I have I played 5, and I have yet to play 6, but I'm going to play that soon. But I always thought that Raccoon City there were more secrets in there, because I found it hard to believe that Umbrella would have an entire lab, nest, near Raccoon City if they didn't basically pay for everything in that city. So that's why their logo was absolutely everywhere. And I just hate Umbrella. It just makes, hearing all this makes you mad. And I mean, I feel bad that Raccoon City was destroyed. It's sad. And now watching this makes me want to go back and watch all of the movies, the animated movies that I've watched, because they were really good. But I really enjoyed this video, and I will leave a link to the original down below for you guys.